On the flyer for today, I was absolutely astounded when I looked down and saw the stat for Alabamians spent $21 billion in insurance premiums in 2014, which apparently was 10% of our gross state product. I knew we pay a lot for insurance. I knew we pay a lot for insurance premiums, but I had absolutely no clue it was that much. Lars is here today he's the director of the Alabama Center for Insurance Information and Research. And I always want to try and pronounce it like Iker or ICO.
If only.
Yeah. So I always try and pronounce every acronym. That's a Dave Brown thing that goes back with us for ways. But anyway, Lars Powell is here to speak with us today about insurance information.
Thanks, Matthew. Happy to be here. This is one of the first groups that I became aware of when I got here on campus was CAPS, and still kind of blown away by all the capabilities that are in, well, this building and the other ones that you guys have. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to just give a brief overview of what we do in the Center for Insurance Information and Research, besides sit around and try to think up a good acronym that we can say faster than that. But hoping that'll be a catalyst for your questions and suggestions, things that we can do together. We recently wrote a little check to CAPS to get a project started, and I think it's some of the best money that we've spent. A little bit about myself. I'm, I guess, a journeyman academic of the Southeastern Conference. I've lived and worked in South Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas, and now Alabama. My red tie has served me well and been a good long-term asset that I did not expect. But very happy to be here in Tuscaloosa, and just started in January, and it seems like that was only last week, but hopefully we've accomplished a few things that we can point to. A quick agenda. Just want to introduce our mission, talk a little bit about our research capabilities without getting, and one of my favorite things is to get into the weeds about economics or math or risk or something, but that's usually not a good way to make friends anywhere. But just want to give a few examples of what we're capable of and some of the things we're working on and what we're trying to accomplish. And then also talk a little bit about our connection to engineering. And it wasn't obvious to me when I first learned of the job or even after I started, but dig in a little deeper, it's quite obvious and very important. Our mission is robust and unabridged. I'm very thankful to whomever wrote this for me. It was here when I arrived, and you never want to come in the first day change a mission statement, at least not officially, but it's to provide highly credible information and research insight for the benefit of various stakeholders, including policymakers, the public, insurance companies, intermediaries, trade groups, and others who need information concerning the management of risk that contribute to the economic development of Alabama. And then we have some, you need focus areas when you've got a mission that's that long. You might say that our mission is a little bit cluttered, that there's a lot of stuff, and if I were going to paraphrase it, what I call our reduced form mission, which is economic math nerd joke, detecting and fixing insurance problems with research, education, and leadership. I hope that communicates something that you can envision a little bit better in terms of what we're trying to do. The catalyst or the impetus for our center to be formed was Hurricane Ivan back in September of 2004. Still on the list of as number 9 of the most expensive natural catastrophes in U.S. history. Can anyone guess what is number 10?
The hurricane? Or the tornado here?
The tornado here, yes. So Alabama has kind of closed out the top 10 in a way that I'm sure we all wish we hadn't. But so in 2014 dollars, that's $8.5 billion, and since we really haven't had inflation, I would say that's a pretty good number. With the tornadoes, they total up at the same source of $7.65 billion 2014 dollars. So we've had a hard go of it in Alabama. The hurricane is, like I said, the reason why the governor became interested in having this center, and they put out a request for proposals on which university would house it. And I don't know if anyone else applied, but I know that we won. So, so this is again, the reason we were created was for the increases in insurance prices after Hurricane Ivan. And then we became somewhat despised when the homeowners insurance premiums didn't go up after the tornado. So there's something fishy here, and that's a part of my job is to explain that, and it's kind of hard to do. But it's important to me, and I hope important to everyone that's involved with the center, that this not be the only thing that we do is to deal with hurricanes, because then if you have a run of good luck and don't have a hurricane or a tornado for a number of years, which by the numbers we shouldn't, it's not something that should happen every year, then people start thinking, well, do they really need their funding? And then you have to start kind of hoping and praying for a hurricane, and that just goes against my nature. So a lot of other things that we plan to be involved in once we've got a good start on the property insurance at the coast. Things like workers' compensation insurance is a big part of the 21 billion number. Health insurance is the biggest. That's and actually that number of 21 billion approximately doubles if we add in the employer-sponsored health insurance like we have here at the university. And well, it's easy to show something as being a very large part of the economy when what its purpose is to pay for health care. Even though health insurance is less like insurance than maybe it once was, it still is the mechanism for making most health care payments, so it becomes a very large thing. The life and property and liability insurance sum up to around $8 billion a year, 8 or 9. It's still a pretty substantial number. Or no, I'm sorry, more than that. It's more like 12 to 14 billion, and then you add in health insurance, get to 21, and then you can add in another 20 or so for the employer-sponsored health insurance. But there's plenty of things that need studying and fixing in health insurance, and we'll have opportunities to do that. Liability issues, the slipping on the banana peel and then needing to sue whoever left it there or didn't pick it up. Of course, tornadoes are important. Car accidents, automobile insurance or automobile liability is probably the biggest risk that most of us as individuals face. You think about all the damage you can do with your car, how many expensive things you could hit, or how many irreplaceable things like people you could injure. And so we've got all of these things that we believe we can contribute to, and of course we'll get to that once we've made some serious progress, understanding and hopefully finding some solutions that we'll talk about here towards the end for our coastal homeowners and property insurance issues. To give a very sparse overview of what I would say are our current research capabilities, they would be in the areas of insurance-related public policy, predictive and behavioral modeling, and actuarial science. And yes, all of those are pretty closely linked through math and economics, but I'll show you what the differences are, at least the way I think of it. So insurance is a legal laboratory in that it is regulated and controlled at the state level, and that includes all of our states, the District of Columbia, and our territories. So there are 56 distinct insurance codes, 56 executive branch insurance regulators, either elected or appointed by the governor in each state and territory, and they are somewhat different across each state and territory. So what's good about that is, well, there's a number of things that might be good about that from a policy standpoint. It's usually fairly easy to contact your insurance regulator if you have a problem, and if anyone's ever tried to contact a federal regulator about something, it's maybe not as easy. At least that's what the state regulators would tell you, and I have no reason to disagree. But any one of the states can change the way that they regulate insurance, how it can be priced, how the claims can be settled, how it can be underwritten, and so forth. And so we can compare across them, and we do a good bit of that. That's something that we're involved in, that I've been doing for the last almost 20 years or so. So one of the questions that we've looked at frequently, that I've looked at frequently, and some of the things that we're doing now, if you change a law or a regulation, will it increase or decrease insurance premiums, and by how much? Or will it increase or decrease the number of insurance companies that are in a certain market? It's usually statistically a regression problem that requires, you look and see which problems are there and then fix them with whatever is the latest and greatest fix. But for the most part, it's just putting premiums or number of companies or whatever on the left-hand side, and then whichever law and appropriate control measures on the right. One of the things that makes this a good way to test things, not just about insurance, but sometimes about other things using insurance data, is that the data available for insurance companies is very rich. There is the regulatory consortium of states has gotten a somewhat similar, or every company in the United States and the territories has to fill out one of these books every year. And this is, it's a long book with very small print, and each little space in there represents a variable that each insurance company has to report. In some cases, they have to report by state. That's this next slide this is the state page from that book. And so there's, by line of business, about 30 different types of insurance. And I know you can't read this, so I could make it up, but it's actually fire, and then there's auto insurance in there, medical malpractice, earthquake, aircraft, ocean, marine, a long list of different types of insurance they have to report, the premiums, losses, expenses, commissions, taxes, and so forth across each state. So there's a lot of interesting things that we can look at. Now, from anywhere on campus, we've purchased a subscription to these data from SNL, and anyone from the UA campus can go and log in and create an account and use those. I would say it's free, but then that would ignore the fact that we paid for it. But it is open for anyone on campus to use, and if you ever have any questions about how to use it or what's available, give a call and we're happy to walk you through it. There's also the National Association of Insurance Commissioners publishes the Compendium of State Laws on Insurance Topics, which the last time I bought it was a 3-volume set. And if you buy their updates every year but don't, it's one of the things that's hard to do is to tell what effect a law has had. You need to know when it was enacted. So trying to keep up with this as a PDF file or a paper form does require some misery for a set of graduate students that get to then update the spreadsheet of this every time that they make changes. So it comes in 3-ring binders, and then whenever a law changes, they update this, I think, twice a year. And when there's a change, they just send you a new insert to put in your book, because they assume that all anyone wants to know is what are the rules today. And of course, when you're an economist studying what effect they have, you want to know when the rule changed and then how other things changed because of that. But it sets up really well to address some public policy issues. Our next kind of area of research I would call predictive and behavioral modeling. It's in some ways it's very similar to what I was talking about before, but I would describe it as predicting the future behavior from observations in the past. And usually this is more at an individual choice level. So one of the things that I did for the state of Arkansas a few years ago was try to predict how many people would participate in the Affordable Care Act. What do they call those? The exchanges, right. It didn't stick with me very well. But something I could see us looking at if Alabama were to sign up, or how many people in Alabama would sign up for Medicaid if that plan were to expand. is certainly something that we can model, and that's usually based on census data and other surveys that the government does. We don't use a lot of first-person data, although that would probably help a lot. It's very expensive to get. How many people would buy or cancel their insurance if the price increased or decreased, and that usually happens. The mathematical process is a little bit more involved, but to sum it up would be, you need to estimate what it is that's making people want to change whether they have insurance or not. Either buy it if they don't have it, or drop it if they have it, and that's either a change in price, so you look at elasticity, a change in what it does for you, so the utility curve, or some other sort of choice rule. What is it that's affecting a person's decision to buy or not buy insurance? Then you have to create a simulated market, which in the case of healthcare reform for the exchanges was we created a simulated environment that estimated all of the employers and then all of the self-employed people and then their family units in the state. And those data are not that hard to get, again, publicly available. But then being able to run a simulation of that and calibrate the model is where it becomes a little bit more art than science. But again, something that we have developed and luckily have already written the code, probably written it very poorly compared to how some other folks in the room might do it, but it does work, and we get what I would call valid estimates, although they haven't been extremely accurate in hindsight based on, well, the lawmaking process and how things change between the time when you estimate it and then a few years later when it comes into being. From the aspect of actuarial science, it's kind of hard to find in actuarial science these corollaries to other things like economics or the sort of math or statistics that we all might learn, because again, it's one of the older economic type professions and has its own language in some ways, but the sort of thing we usually do in this realm, and I'm not an actuary. I used to say that I was kind of like a jailhouse actuary, when you have a person that's in prison and learns all about the law and then they tell everybody else what they should do to get released. I'm kind of like that, but an actuary. I haven't passed their exams, but I've acted as an actuary for a number of insurance companies. I've taught a lot of actuaries and think I have a pretty good feel for what's required, but it's from a public policy perspective, as a research and education center, being able to evaluate the pricing and financial strength of existing insurance companies, or one of the things that we've been doing a lot lately is working with the Governor's Coastal Insurance Working Group and trying to evaluate different proposals as to how much would a new entity be able to pay if we created kind of a government insurance entity, and how much money would it need to have before it could, people could be confident that their claims would be paid if we had a hurricane. And then trying to figure out how it would save money becomes a different question, but interesting nonetheless. Trying to evaluate whether pricing is adequate or excessive or unfairly discriminatory is, again, a big piece of actuarial science. And once we evaluate these things, we can suggest appropriate changes. Well, without backing up to a lecture that no one wants to hear, I don't want to go into more detail about that, so I'm going to just roll over to the things that we're working on now. The one I put at the top is the Strengthen Alabama Homes project. That's what we're partnering with CAPS on. The purpose is, and it's run by the Department of Insurance, and they're making grant funds available currently to people in the two coastal counties of Mobile and Baldwin County to retrofit their homes to what's called the fortified standard. And I'm probably talking below a lot of people in this room. If you're in construction engineering, you may have heard of this, but the things you can do from a construction standpoint to make a home more resilient to wind losses, and we'll show an example of that in just a minute. But what we're doing, and it's a valid question, well, what is the insurance center doing with Strengthen Alabama Homes? And where I see our skill set kind of meshing with CAPS and maybe engineering some as well, is we're building a database, we're building an online interface for people to apply for these grants. And then statistically, we're going to try to figure out what's the best way to get people to participate. So one thing about these grants is they don't pay 100%. Say it costs $10,000 to retrofit a home, and that's probably on the high side. I don't want anybody to, well, assuming anybody watches this video, I don't want them to leave thinking, oh wow, it's very expensive to do, but the grant might cover half to 3/4 of that. And so we've got to find people that are willing to participate and have their home inspected and then pay their share of having it fixed. So we're going to see the way that people respond to, as we push these things out on social media, in the mail, on television, the radio, then figure out which things work the best, so that hopefully this will be a multi-year project. I believe after 2018, it will also be available outside of the 2 coastal counties. So there could be some opportunities to do this to harden a home against tornado damage as well. And just to kind of crack the code, because a number of states have had grants like this and had money available so that people could retrofit their homes, but been unable to give it away, or unable to give it away in an efficient manner. Again, because you have to have the buy-in from the homeowner. And if you think about it from just some very round numbers at the coast, the average homeowner's wind insurance at the coast has gone from less than $1,000, maybe $700 or $800, up to $2,000 or $3,000. They can get up to a 60% reduction in that wind premium by retrofitting their home. Now, if they had to pay the full cost, say it's $10,000 or $8,000, and then they're saving $700 or $800 a year, that's a pretty long payback period, and it's hard to get consumers to think about things and make decisions that don't affect the amount of money they have to spend today, or that don't positively affect the amount of money they have to spend today. If they have to come out of pocket $10,000 in order to get $700 or $800 a year for 10 years, then or longer, however long they stay in the home, then that might make economic sense, but when people say, oh, I won't have that $10,000 to spend, it becomes a very hard sell. And we find even when you shrink that down to $2,000, it's still hard, but it makes a lot more immediate financial sense. The next thing we're working on is Alabama Insurance Market Report. Yes?
Why would that go on to the consumer? It seems to me to strengthen your home would help the insurance companies, because then they wouldn't have such catastrophic claims, and that they would be willing to pony up some of that. Okay,
fair question. What they're ponying up is that up to 60% discount on your premium.
That's where that's coming from. It's not coming from the state. I'm sorry. Right. I thought it was like the state was doing that through a grant program.
No, well, the state requires the insurance companies to do that, and they come up with those numbers based on an actuarial assessment of how much less the losses would be.
Does this only affect actual houses, or does it actually affect like condos, like condominiums, like larger buildings? So
it affects. I hope I don't get this wrong. To best of my knowledge, it's for homeowners. There's a separate program for business owners, and I don't know as much about it, but it's somehow tied into the home efficiency from an energy standpoint as well as a resiliency standpoint. And I know that was a law that was proposed, and I don't know if it passed. I've been kind of focused on the homeowner thing, but that's the best I can do. Generally, condos, the owner of a condominium has limited exposure. The condominium association would buy insurance for the outer structure, and while that cost has gone up, generally they are built to a higher standard, is my understanding. We're doing a report on what our insurance market looks like. Seems like this would be pretty obvious, and that a lot of states would do this already, but I haven't seen one. And it was an idea that I got because, well, for one thing, it will identify these issues. We're supposed to identify and then solve, or detect and then solve insurance market problems. How do we know what insurance market problems we have? And of course, we know that the homeowners insurance market has a problem because the prices went up and a lot of people rightfully complained about it. But there might be other areas where it's not as obvious. A lot more of the cost gets passed through, say, to an employer in health insurance. So it might be important to look at that. But we're doing a pretty comprehensive effort to see what the trends have been for premiums and losses in each line of insurance in Alabama and then comparing it to the surrounding states. I mentioned earlier the Governor's Coastal Insurance Working Group. I get to spend 2 days a week at the coast, which if you want to think about that as a vacation, you can think about it that way. I'd be happy to trade with you for a day and see if you still feel that way. But from the first day of September until either we finish our report or it becomes Christmas time, I get to be there for a couple days a week and meet some pretty amazing people that are concerned about their insurance costs and help them try to come up with a solution. And what our role has been, along with the Alabama Insurance Department, is to evaluate these suggestions of what we could change and see what difference that makes in price and availability of insurance. What we've learned about coastal insurance is that there's a lot we don't know. We know that about half of the homes in those two counties don't have a mortgage, and therefore they aren't required by the bank, by the lender, to have wind insurance or flood insurance. We aren't certain how many homes actually have it and how many homes don't, or which homes they are that have it and which ones don't. And you can imagine this becomes a pretty big public policy issue. You look at what happened in Columbia, South Carolina a couple weeks ago, where they had a 1,000-year flood. And I looked up, you can see from FEMA's website how many people in each geographic area have flood insurance. In the city of Columbia, South Carolina, there were 792 flood insurance policies that were active in 2015. And a few more homes than that are currently still underwater. So there's a lot of people that just don't know what they're going to do. And of course, those people owe money ultimately to Fannie Mae, which is us, the taxpayer. And so that's a pretty big liability at the federal government level. The state government had recently allowed a lot of development in a flood zone. They said, well, hey, I've lived here for 30 years and there's never been a flood. And well, that's why we call it a 1,000-year flood. Actually, that's not why we call it a 1,000-year flood, but it was an interesting arithmetic lesson for those people who had lobbied very hard to be able to develop this land that was in the what they called the 100-year floodplain. Well, it hasn't happened. We've got at least 100 years till that happens. It's a very bad misunderstanding of what those things mean, and they're probably feeling a little silly they argued about that. A project that I'm excited about is we're trying to estimate the effects of this fortified construction on the value of a home. Give people another way to internalize that value. If they're going to resell their home, how much more can they sell it for? The MLS has just started collecting those data, but they don't have a good enough sample to know what effect it has. So one of the things that I like to point to say that we will work with anyone to get the job done. We've actually hired one of the faculty at Auburn to work with us, of all places. But they had a real estate expert that's done this sort of study before, and so we brought him in as a consultant. And we've got the data on which homes in the country or along the coast are fortified, and then we have the sale price of every home in the southeastern United States, at least the states that touch water. We have the sale price for every home that's sold since they started fortifying homes, and as soon as we can sort through those 8.5 gigabytes of data that are all formatted differently from each county, we'll have some pretty interesting answers about what effect this has on the value of a home. Co-author on this project, again, it's Harris Hollins at Auburn University, is on the board of the National Home Appraisers Journal and says that we can kind of push it up to the national and back down to the states and get credit in home, or get that value to show up for the bank to understand as well as for us. How am I doing on time? What time do we finish? Okay, thought you were going to say 5 minutes ago, and I can't back this up that way. But no, okay, we ought to be just about right. Trying to understand and improve the catastrophe models that are applied in Alabama. So there's these models that were, all the companies that try to model these catastrophes started in universities and then have been spun off and are largely in the private sector now, but RMS and Air Worldwide and EquiCat are the three big ones, and they go through a really involved process of trying to estimate what the losses will be from hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and so forth over a long period of time, maybe 100 years or 1,000 years. But that seems, what we've learned in the insurance industry is that just looking at past data of what has happened when you have very rare events is inadequate for pricing insurance in the future. Back in the 1980s, the industry assumed that there couldn't be a loss more than $1 billion, so that was kind of the loading that they worked into their premiums for homeowners insurance. Then you had Hurricane Hugo in 1989 that hit South Carolina, and it cost $4 billion. So they were wrong and they lost a lot of money. They said, okay, so we average this in there and maybe we want to think of having a $2 or $3 billion, $4 billion, $5 billion loading, and so they went with that, and then 1992, Hurricane Andrew was $26 billion in Florida. Still today, the state of Florida, the homeowners insurance premiums that have been paid, even though they haven't had a loss in 10 years, are less than the total amount of losses that have been paid out on those policies since they started keeping data back in 1957. There are actually 4 states that have that distinction, at least in the sample that I'm looking at for a current project, which starts, actually our sample starts in 1993, and from 93 through 2014, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida have all had more losses than they've taken in premiums for homeowners insurance. The thing we're trying to understand, we call it barriers to exit in homeowners insurance, is why are they still offering this? We had a legislative, what they call a legislative briefing in Montgomery to talk to the coastal legislators about the scope of the problem and why premiums go up. And I won't name names, although this is nothing to be embarrassed about. Someone in the front row said, if I ran one of those companies, or if I ran my company like that, having a 30% loss over the last 10 years, I'd be fired. Who got fired for this? Well, really, I guess you'd have to fire whatever higher power you believe in, because the hurricane was really what happened, and not, or you could say that the insurance company wasn't charging enough, and I don't think that's the answer we were looking for, but it was a great question. Why do insurance companies continue to participate in markets like, in states like Florida and North Carolina and Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas, where the losses seem to just add up and the premiums never catch up? And we're not done yet, but some of the insights we're gleaning is that homeowners insurance has value to the insurance company beyond its premiums and losses. Who has ever applied for homeowners insurance? It's an unabridged process, right? There's a lot of information you have to get to the agent, and you want to go shopping for it. It could take a lot of time and effort, and people don't like to do that as much. Whereas for your auto insurance, you might shop that. You can shop that online in less than 15 minutes, right? And save 15% or more. So if you're selling, or half that time now with their competitor and Progressive, indeed they will show you their price and 4 or 5 of their competitors, and sometimes they're not the lowest, and they will show you that, and they're usually right. Very competitive market, but if you have someone's homeowner's insurance and their auto insurance, guess what they don't do as much? They don't shop their auto insurance as much, or their life insurance, or maybe the insurance for their small business, or all these other types of insurance that we might buy. So homeowners is kind of an anchor for those accounts. Yes?
Yeah, but in order to have a mortgage on a home, you have to have homeowners insurance.
Right, but you don't have to have it with State Farm or Allstate.
No, but as a general market, when you say an exit, you're required by law to have it. So the insurance companies are going to have to come in here because it's required by law. Otherwise, then no one would get a mortgage and no one would be buying houses here.
That's exactly the question, right? But the insurance companies don't have to do it. And the way they've been doing it, they've paid out more in claims than they brought in premiums. Then, of course, the prices are regulated, so they can only increase them so much, and that becomes somewhat of a political question. So, yes, you're right. People have to have it, and you'd probably wind up creating some sort of government insurance entity like Florida and Louisiana have done as an insurer of last resort. But the question is, why does a private company that operates for a profit, why would they choose to come here and sell homeowners insurance? And it's kind of a thick and nasty question. There's not an obvious answer, but we think we might be onto something with this idea that once you have someone's homeowner's insurance, you maybe don't run the risk of losing their other lines of business. That's not what I would call a conclusion, but it's kind of a hypothesis that we're in the process of testing. And actually, I got an email from my co-author on that last night, but haven't read it yet, so I might know more tomorrow.
But isn't it also true that the insurance companies, like if you're thinking of places like Allstate and State Farm, they have policies all over the United States.
Oh,
So even
absolutely.
if they might lose money here, they're probably making it in Minnesota and Michigan and New York or whatever. I mean, so it balances out. The balance sheet for the whole corporation
Right.
would reflect more of a profit as long as they're distributed in more states.
How do you feel about that if you live in North Dakota? They're making money on you, but they're losing on Alabama.
I have to have insurance. I don't have a
Yeah.
choice. And I'll bet you the people that live here in central Alabama pay a little bit more, even though I think the coast is what makes us lose money.
Well, so
Okay,
I've got
I'm
to go down
taking
there
a
on
guess
Thursday.
here. I don't know any- I have no
I would
facts,
love
but-
for you to come with me and then say that, and then we'll find out how fast you can run. Because they say the exact same thing. Why are we paying for these tornadoes in Tuscaloosa when their insurance didn't go up as much as ours did after the hurricane? And it's a very complex topic and one that I don't expect everyone to ever agree on. But again, I showed you the map of how insurance is regulated, and that's also where rates are approved. So it would be very hard for Allstate to say to the regulator in Minnesota, we're going to bump up your premium a little bit because we're losing money in Florida and Alabama. And they're going to be like, well, they don't even have a winter down there. Why are we paying their insurance premiums for them? They'd have a pretty good point. So it becomes, I would say it's very difficult, if not impossible, to say, well, the company makes money in the other states where it does business. It's okay for it to lose money in Alabama. And then what do you say? What do you say to Alpha, the Alabama Farm Bureau insurance company that's, for the most part, a single state insurer? Or are they supposed to just lose money? I guess they don't technically have to be here either. But my point is that it's a very complex question. And
Let's try and hold as many of the questions to the end, because I know you got a neat video.
oh, I do. But it's also very short. So. For the catastrophe models, which is where we kind of ran off the rails, these models are at best opaque. We don't get to see what's in them. There's a commission in Florida that studies parts of them and approves them, and then the other states kind of take their word for it that they're process accurate and unbiased. And I can see why that might upset some people in states outside of Florida and even inside of Florida, but I also understand that I can't go ask Colonel Sanders to tell me the 11 herbs and spices because they're a secret, right? And that's their trade secret, and that's how they make a living or how they make a profit is with their trade secret. So we can't expect these modelers to just tell us exactly what they do, but they do make this 500-ish page report to the state of Florida every year about their models and the way they back tested them to show that they're accurate. Still, every time I've spoken to a group about these models, which I'm not an expert in, but have had the opportunity to spend time with each of the modeling companies and have gotten to ask them some pretty candid questions, and I feel gotten candid answers to them. Each time I talk to a group about the models, they say, well, they're wrong because I know they aren't taking this into consideration. In some cases, I know the things that they're studying, and they publicize the variables in their model, just not exactly how they mesh them together. But to give you an understanding of the scope of these models, we were visiting with Air Worldwide in Boston a few weeks ago and asked just what's the infrastructure that runs this? And they said, well, each of our programmers, and I think they have 300 employees that work on the models, and that's all they do is try to improve these models all year. And they each write the code in whatever programming language they're most familiar with, and they send it over to India and have it all recoded into C#. And they run it on a mainframe supercomputer, and each time they want to recalibrate the model, it runs for 3 months. That's I've had some programs that were kind of clunky and ran for a while, but 3 months to recalibrate their model once they hit go on a supercomputer written in C# is a pretty big bit of code, and it's hard for me to think that they've left. And they might be considering something incorrectly, although I don't know that I can tell them how to improve it myself. But it's hard for me to think they've left something out when there's that much in there. Now, that's not a very scientific answer, but and also while we're still working on it. So some of the things we're doing here is coming up with what I call a poor man's catastrophe model, that trying to calibrate to what the current commercial models, what they find, and then knowing that if you've ever worked on a project like this, probably the returns, the second derivative of that function is negative. So once you start, it's going to increase at a decreasing rate, and they've been doing this for a few decades now. And what we find is that we can come, I wouldn't say close to what they do, but we can calibrate our model to have similar answers to theirs, and then be able to change it and say, well, if this changed, how much would that change the outcome, or how much should that change the amount of capital that the insurance companies need to hold, which is something that's maybe not studied as much as it should be. So that's the process that we're in, is trying to understand. And then the other thing we've noticed is that they have a lot of data about Florida because of all the coastal value that's there. And a lot of that's kind of firsthand. They've had boots on the ground looking at things. And my understanding is that in Alabama, it's more satellite collected. So if we can make those data more granular and make the model more accurate that way, we're in the process kind of going back and forth with some of these modeling companies of under what scenario, if we're going to dig into this and help you get more granular data, under what scenario would you accept it? Because you could see that if our intention is to make the price of homeowners insurance in Alabama less, they might have a grain of distrust. If we come back and say, well, you think that the elevation's this and it's really much higher, so the wind speed is going to be lower and so forth, trying to come up with a system in which we can help them augment their data to run their models in Alabama. We haven't gotten anywhere besides talking about it yet, but it's something that we think could bear some fruit going forward. Now, the thing that I guess at first was perplexing to me when I heard about this job was, I get all the insurance stuff, and I've been doing that for a couple decades and really like it. And they said that there's also going to be a strong connection with engineering. I said, well, great, I love trains. And they said, no, that's not the engineering that we're talking about. And if anyone's familiar with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, they have this pretty nifty laboratory in South Carolina where they build homes and then they build them differently, and then side by side they see what it takes to destroy them when you're using different construction methods. And if we can run this video, it's less than a minute, but what it has is 2 homes identical except their construction methods, and they apply a Category 3 hurricane, which they can generate indoors. Pretty impressive facility. And you see the one on the left is the one that's just regular, like most of the homes in Alabama. And this home on the right has the floor connected with steel straps to the ground, to the concrete pad, and then the roof is connected in the same way to the studs, and the roof deck itself is sealed with a special secondary water barrier and then a synthetic roof underlayment. And what they found is that if you can keep the roof on, keep the home from blowing off its foundation, then after a Category 3 hurricane, what you've got is maybe having to replace a few shingles instead of having water damage throughout your entire home, because, of course, when there's the storm, there's also the rain that goes along with it. So keeping things dry that way is important. So then the conclusion, and they've done a lot more tests than just that one, and it's really an amazing place to visit if you ever have the opportunity, and especially if they're going to wreck something for you. I was at our large-scale structures lab here on campus the other day, and I can't wait till that big concrete beam gets what's coming to it. I hope to be there, but that's one of the neat things about insurance is you get to break stuff to see what happens. They've got the place in Virginia that crashes cars, and that's a pretty fun test to watch too. In South Carolina, where they break homes and other buildings. Like I said, an indoor Category 3 hurricane. There is a lab in Canada that says they're working on an indoor tornado, and Shane got in contact with them, and we're hoping that once they get that thing to work, we can go up there. And he said we were going to bring a dummy dressed up like Gus Malzahn and throw it in there and videotape it, and yeah, roll tide. But obviously, the long-term solution to catastrophe insurance problems is in this fortified construction or performance-based engineering sector. That if you can build a home that can withstand Hurricane Ike or Hurricane Katrina, or I think what some folks researching here learned was that 85% of the damage from the tornado in Tuscaloosa would have been, if we had a stronger building code to this fortified construction level, that 85% of that damage would have been avoided. There's still not much you can do about the EF5 tornado. It's hard to build something on a large scale like all the homes in a city that can stand up to that. But if you can use this fortified construction, we could have avoided 85% of the damage that was done. 85% of $7.65 billion is money I'd like to have in my pocket. But then on top of that, that's just what the insurance companies paid. Imagine what the cities and counties, the municipalities had to pay to haul off the trash. I think FEMA stepped in and helped with some of that, as they do sometimes and sometimes don't. But the amount of money that could be saved by having this performance-based construction, and I don't need to tell, I think, anyone in here about kind of construction engineering, but what I've been told is that the history of the discipline has been about keeping people alive. And so if a storm happened or an earthquake, whatever, and the home's a total loss, but the people there are still alive, then you've scored 10 out of 10. And what is in the process of changing is to try and save money as well as lives. Not saying that one is more important than the other, not my place to say that, but if we can see a cost-benefit analysis that tells us it's better to build homes this way, and while retrofitting a home can be pretty expensive, if you start out building a home using the fortified construction technology, then I think the cost addition to an average home is something less than $2,000. Small percentage of what it costs to build a home, and you can have it still be standing after a tornado or an earthquake. So one of the things that we're doing is we've recently gone in with civil and construction engineering on the purchase of a debris cannon. Now this one you can see is at Texas Tech, but it's still a pretty neat looking thing, and my understanding is that we have ordered the one that's going to be here on campus. And the difference between ours and theirs is theirs has one barrel, and ours will be if you put these two things together. We're going to have 4 barrels on it and be able to shoot the traditional debris cannon. You can see well, you probably can't see what they're doing, but they're shooting that at a wall they built, and they launch a 2x4, and that's supposed to simulate a projectile that happens during a tornado or a hurricane, because if the wind is in the process of taking your roof off and then a stick goes through your window, the whole house is going to have a pressure problem and not fare well. But what this debris cannon will be able to do, the others don't, is simulate a more realistic scenario, because there's usually not just one 2x4 floating through the air during a hurricane or a tornado. There's a lot of different things, and of course I've got these dreams of loading it with bowling balls and pumpkins and watermelons and just kind of seeing what happens. I doubt they'll really let me do that, even though I paid for it. But it should be really neat to learn in more of a real world, or a more realistic setting, what happens when these projectiles come in and we've got different types of projectiles and wind pressures and things like that. But I'm excited about that and look forward to seeing what we can learn, even though it's certainly, I've told you a little bit more than I actually know about it. I made up those last couple of things. So we are online at this web address. Patty's been in charge of our online presence, and I'm very pleased with what she's done. So we've got our website, and then we've also got all the social media outlets where, as we learn new things, we want to share them with you and hope that you'll be able to help us make them better and give us new ideas of what we should work on next and other ways that we can partner with folks on campus. Thanks. Questions? Comments? Almost out of time. Yes?
Where is the county going to be located?
I was shown that room, and the folks that showed it to me have already left. So it's somewhere over on this side of campus, and it used to have a different purpose. Yes, that sounds right.
Would it be available for touring by classes?
I can imagine that it would be. There might be a liability waiver once they turn it on, but you know, the students are the only folks that work on campus that aren't covered by workers' compensation. So if we're going to have some fun with it, they're the ones that need to be in there, not us. That's a joke. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Just right.